Welcome to What If Alternate History channel. Today I want to talk about what if the Burstyn-Motorgeschütz was used in World War I. In our timeline, the Burstyn-Motorgeschütz was invented in 1911 by Günther Burstyn and was an early model of a tank. Even though the tank hasn't come into existence until the British used them in World War I, the model showed to be a masterpiece of engineering. The inventor showed it to the Austrian-Hungarian and the German War Ministry, but both rejected it. So what if in an alternate timeline the Burstyn-Motorgeschütz was used in World War I? So before World War I, the Austrian and Hungarian or the German War Ministry has enthusiasm for the unusual machine, and they produced some as prototypes in 1911 and 1912. Although the motorized vehicle works well, the army doesn't consider it a main weapon in a war scenario, as they focus more on cavalry tactics. Some generals see in it its full potential, and convince conservative military staff to give it a chance. Because of the engagement, the Burstyn-Motorgeschütz is produced in small quantities before World War I. During World War I, while and after the First Battle of the Marne, soldiers and generals are desperate for new inventions. As trench warfare begins, all military tactics prove to be outdated, and innovative ideas need to be taken. In this situation, a young lieutenant proposes to use the Burstyn-Motorgeschütz. The old staff are not taken with enthusiasm, but think this would be a weapon which might prove to be valuable if it works. The first use of the Burstyn-Motorgeschütz. Even though the masterpiece of engineering had been tested and improved, it still showed some weaknesses. It still broke down sometimes, but it did its job well in the trainings. A young lieutenant which proposed that idea now gave his hope to his good friend, another lieutenant. He and the specially selected crew had all engineering, battle experience and training with the new war machine. But still they had some doubts. If the machine broke down in the destruction of the battlefield, and then they would be all killed. On the 10th of November, after improving the machine and teaching the crew, they were ready. So 20 so-called Schildkröten, and this is a German word for turtles, and they named it Schildkröten because they looked like turtles, were used on attack on the Western Front. After the sun had risen, 60 well-trained men got into these new machines and headed west. Although slow, they were not an easy target for the enemy. As for artillery, they were hard to see and hit, and for infantry and machine guns, they were protected by the tank. After successfully rolling over the second trench, they saw the German army couldn't take advantage because even though the Schildkröten worked perfectly, they couldn't defend their comrades from enemy fire. To show their effectiveness, they rolled over the fourth trench, and they felt the war might soon end, and hope arose that they betimes could leave the battlefield to be near their families. After only a few meters, one of the Schildkröten had a breakdown and needed to be repaired. This could have meant the death for the 3 soldiers in the tank. But the lieutenant had a genius plan. The other war machines drove by and shielded them against enemy fire. They could fix the problem in less than 5 minutes, thanks to their engineering wisdom. After some minutes, they reached the German trenches. They were welcomed by praise from their fellow comrades. Even though the offense was unsuccessful, the Schildkröten showed to be perfect in this new terrain of modern warfare. After coming back, even very conservative generals and staff saw the Schildkröte was a machine of the future. So they issued an order to produce 300 of them, to see how they would perform in a larger battle. Also smaller issues were fixed and new tactics were planned on the web to secure the advance of the Schildkröten. Meanwhile, the French and British saw the new machines, but because they didn't lose any territory and bad communication, they lost track of these new machines. first battle with tanks. When they were first used on a massive scale, which got infantry and artillery tactics, they had an enormous result. This made an enormous moral loss to the Entente. They lost parts of Belgium, which were previously occupied by the Germans. Also, the German army could secure Dunkirk for themselves the day after the attack. The situation in France. A few days later, the Germans pushed down to the shores of northern France. This really freaked out the Western Allies, which were quickly moved to a massive numbers of troops to northeastern France. Also, the civilians of France feared an overall of the German army, so they protested, hoarded food, and sent their children out of Paris and its surroundings. Also, some workers went on strike and demanded an end to the war. The reaction of the Entente. The French and British army were enormously shocked by the German advance. The morale of them broke down, but they still could hold the German advance, because the Germans were not able to produce enough new weapons. Also, it turned out that not all soldiers were well enough trained. Situation in Germany. The manufacturers of the Schildkröte are now producing this new weapon on a massive scale, and after a few months, thousands of them had been made. Reaction to the tanks on the side of the Allies. The commanders of the Entente realized the enormous advantage of this new weapon. Although they focused some energy on their own tank model, most of human labor and capital was focused on making anti-tank guns and artillery. November 1914. The Germans had successes in eastern France and on the Eastern Front. They could capture Amiens and Reims. Also, Entente developed new weapons to destroy the Schildkröte, but they proved to be ineffective, as they were too small to be hit by artillery. December 1914, the German army was near Paris and had sighted the city. In a quick move, many citizens moved out of the city. Also, many soldiers deserted, knowing the Germans would win the war. As the first Schildkröten were approaching the city, the citizens surrendered to the German army. The French government, seeing no chance to defeat the Germans, surrendered on the 1st of January 1915. Also, Russia, being crushed with the new weapon and seeing France fall surrender under an acceptable peace treaty. Britain, now without a big ally on the shores of Europe, asked for a formal peace treaty without any reparations or land loss. The war ends. Germany asked from France for some very small regions and war reparations. Also lets Belgium alone, as it would upset Britain, so no land loss there. Also Russia loses territories to newly created nations. The lieutenant who proposed to use the Schildkröten gets after the war the Iron Cross and many other medals as his friend and becomes general, but he and his friend who fought on the battlefield were soon forgotten. The results of the war. The Ottoman Empire continues to exist after World War I, but there are a lot of internal problems, which would be needed to be solved if the Ottoman Empire wanted to survive the following centuries. But an enormous difference to our timeline would be that radical Islam wouldn't come into existence, as the Saudis, which were Wahhabis, which sponsored radical Islam, terrorists would be in this timeline under Ottoman rule, so they would have less power and radical Islam wouldn't exist. Also, the Ottoman Empire would control a large oil reserve of the world. Just imagine the amount of oil which Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, etc. produce today, and that all in one single nation. The USA is more self-focused without involvement in the First World War, and the Great Depression doesn't hit the world as bad as in our timeline. I think the Great Depression was a partial result of the World War I. Firstly, destabilizing Europe and destroying the European economy, so no setback and less investments from Europe, and the money which came from the nation which lost the war led to an over-speculation. In Russia, the Tsar wouldn't have been overthrown because he would have made peace in 1914 or 1915, but liberals would slowly make Russia a more democratic and liberal state. This would mean that the Soviet Union would never exist. This would result in Russia being a modern and developed state today. In this alternate timeline, Russia would lose territories to nations split out of Russia. The nations founded on previous Russian soil become German puppets and trade allies, but they don't become military allies to scare Russia. In China, without the influence of Soviet Russia, the Chinese Communist Party never comes into existence or has never a major impact on China. This means the Republic of China lives on. The government is still a kind of dictatorship, but slowly let China industrialize. This means China would be an industrialized nation in 1950, but there would still be a rivalry between China and Japan, which China would ultimately win, just because of its sheer size. Britain doesn't lose nothing, even though they lost battles against the Germans. Germany can't break the navy, and Britain doesn't lose anything or gain anything. France is easily defeated and gets relatively small reparations to pay, as the focus on the German army which planned the war was to contain power in Germany. Also, it must give some small territories to Germany, but the French never see a treaty like that one which was put on Germany. After the war, French is bitter but not as outraged as Germany was in our timeline, because reparations are easier and land losses are minimal. Also, some colonies are annexed by Germany. In Austria-Hungary gets pushed by Germany in a trade federation like the EU today. Also, Karl I begins to modernize Austria-Hungary and gives liberties to other peoples in the empire. Japan, being on the losing side, gives back the colonies taken from Germany and loses nothing. They then focus their power on China. The situation after the war. In Germany, conservatives and militarists gain more power, which holds about 5 to 10 years, when Social Democrats beat them in several votes. Slowly but surely, Germany becomes more liberal. They manage decolonization, limiting the power of the emperor, and more laws in the favor of working people. Germany is now the greatest power in Europe, and its economy dominates the continent. Britain and France, both nations don't fall to the horrible ideology of fascism, but rather the life in both nations goes on. Without the war destroying the European economy, no major crisis exists, and Social Democrats also gain in these regions more power. Russia. Also, this nation sees the rise of Social Democrats. The power of the Tsar is limited, and reforms to make the country more modern and democratic are made. Liberals and Social Democrats erect a constitutional monarchy in Russia. So, to make a conclusion, after some decades, the Social Democrats gain enough power to call in meetings for a global league like the United Nations Organization today. The nations now in mostly the hands of Social Democrats give up the colonies. These colonies do much better without proxy wars, like in the Cold War, and peaceful decolonization. Also, aid money is sent to them to also industrialize them, to make them more industrialized nations, which would mean they would also vote Social Democratic. Also, in the military, the great nations of Europe agreed to demobilize. So no new war could erupt and give the militaries power in the plan of the Social Democrats. Also, an organization like the EU is founded to peacefully cooperate. Also, the US sees us with the socialism, but they see the Europeans more socialistic and them more free capitalism with some elements of socialism and freedom. So, the final review would be the world doesn't see the horrors of the Soviet Union, the Great Depression, World War II, and the Cold War. Millions of lives are saved, and a solid union of nations is built, leading humanity to its fullest development. I want to thank you for your attention. If you want to write me, you can write me in the comment section below, or the email address which I will put below the video.